Second.
Mail.
Thank you. Sorry to pick it up.
We'll call the order the Dune City Council regular meeting on Wednesday, December 12th at 6 o'clock. We get a call to order, or I guess good. Roll call.
Council President Sheldon Meyer,
Present.
Councilor Duke Wells,
Here.
Councilor Susan Snow, here, Councilor Tom Allen,
Here.
Councilor Robert Orr,
Here.
Mayor Forsyth is absent and excused, and I honestly expect Councilor Montgomery any minute.
Is he like my wife and just tells time with the hourglass and gets turned over? Let's rise for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved and unanimous. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Point of order, we do have amended bills of the session. I
With,
did highlight the differences so that they jump out.
with the amended bills of the session in variety above.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's passed. All right, announcements. Water testing by the Oregon Health Authority determined levels of cyanobacteria in Silkers Lake are at acceptable levels. However, the OHA requires 2 clear test results before giving an all clear, and we are awaiting the results of the second test.
I do have an update.
Yes.
The second test was done, the bacteria is back, so it will require, and only at levels for vulnerable populations, which are, as you know, pregnant women, small children, the elderly, and those who have immune deficiency disorders. They will require 2 more tests to come back clear before they will lift the concern, the warning.
Do we know the timing on those 2 new tests?
No, we don't. I participated in a teleconference last week with the Director of Division of Water Resources and all the parties that were involved. And of course, understandably, nobody has money for these tests. But Division of Health is going to foot the bill for the testing for this purpose, but in the future, they are not going to be doing it. So just to let you know, that's something that needs to be looked at, discussed, and try and figure out what's the best way to move forward on that. But for now, yes, they're going to continue conducting, and no, I do not know. They test twice a week. So I'm hoping, I will not be here, but someone here at the office will be checking my email and be able to forward it on if the results, no matter what the results are, we forward them on to the Silk. The people who have entered their names onto the email list for that purpose.
Is there another agency that could do the testing, or if not, do we know how much the testing costs for us to do it? Or?
Well, you approved at the last city council meeting, it was approved, I don't know that you were probably not present for that, I don't remember. Anyway, it was approved for me to purchase 5 of the smaller tests, and they only have, the problem is they only have a year's shelf life. And so I hate to spend a whole lot of money and then have them just go bad, but that way we'll have them. I haven't bought them yet because I was waiting to put it off as long as I can. Usually if we're gonna have a balloon, it's gonna be in October.
Right.
And so I thought I'd get a little bit closer to October next year, purchase 5 of the tests so that our water testers can use that and see if there's a warning. In the meantime, I'm trying to develop a decent email list so that I can just notify people quickly to let them know. And at this point, I'm taking emails from people who live on the other side of the lake that aren't in Dune City too. Anybody, I mean, we're sending it out to Nightingales and everybody.
Right, for anyone on Silk.
Anybody who chooses to be on the list, yeah.
All right, so there's no real rush for us to buy until they've given us a go-ahead. They said they will complete testing.
For this year.
This year, if these next two aren't good, they'll do another two or something.
Right, they'll keep testing until they get the all clear on this one.
All right.
But we need to do something different in the future, and they're working on it too. With the legislature going into session, they may well request specific funding for that purpose or something. So,
Well, that's good information. Thank you. City Hall will be closed from Monday to December 24th until Tuesday, January 2nd of 2019. And you all deserve a break, so I'm happy to see that you scheduled that. You won't be hassling us either, right?
what? I'm taking my phone, yes.
The annual goal-setting session is scheduled for Wednesday, February 13th, 2019 at 4 o'clock. And is that open to anybody and everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. So make sure we get that on our calendars. Is there any citizen input on items that are not listed on the agenda?
There is none.
All right. Public hearings. We are having a public hearing on conditional use permit for boundary line adjustment, and the applicant is David Dumas. Is he here? Good deal. I'm supposed to read this. This evening, we have a public hearing on an application for a conditional use permit to make a property line adjustment as applied for by Mr. David Dumas. These proceedings will be recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 3 quasi-judicial procedure. Staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria which have also been listed in the Planning Commission's findings of fact and recommendation. These are the critical criteria the City Council must use in making its decision. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria which you believe apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city and parties involved an opportunity to respond to the issue would preclude an appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Any party interested in a land use matter may challenge the qualification of any counselor to participate in such hearing and decision. Such challenge must state facts relied upon by the party relating to a counselor's bias, prejudgment, conflict of interest, or other facts from which the challenging party has concluded that the counselor will not make a decision in an impartial manner. Such challenges shall be made prior to the commencement of the public hearing. The mayor shall give the challenged counselor an opportunity to respond. A motion to accept or deny the challenge will be accepted and voted. Such challenges shall be incorporated into the record of the hearing. Does any member of the public wish to challenge a counselor's impartiality? Does any counselor wish to declare a conflict of interest, bias, or extra parte contact?
I would like to make a statement,
Okay.
if I may, and that is that I have a friendship from work with April Dumas. We have not discussed this issue. The only thing I know about it is what I've read here, and I don't feel that I have any bias, but I do want to make that declaration.
All right, thank you. I now open the public hearing for the conditional use permit. It is 6:08 p.m. Could you please have the staff report?
Just a second. For the record, I would like to announce that during all of this, Councilor Montgomery is here and present. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, staff report.
Okay, you have copies of the staff report in your meeting packets, and in it, it outlines all of the applicable Dune City Code. The conditional use permit before the council is requested in order to allow a property line adjustment between two adjoining parcels. You've got the site map in your packets. One parcel is on Cold Springs Lane and the other is on Woodland Lane. In this case, a conditional use permit is required by Dune City Code because both parcels are less than 1 acre in size. The purpose of the proposed property line adjustment is to implement an agreement between the owners of the two parcels regarding ownership of approximately 250 square feet that's along the common edges of the two parcels. Notice of the public hearings at the Planning Commission and this City Council have been posted, have been mailed to neighbors and published in the newspaper as required by Dune City Code. On November 13th, the Planning Commission held its public hearing on the application. After reviewing all of the applicable standards and the approval criteria, which again are all listed in the staff report, the commissioners voted unanimously to recommend the City Council approve the application with 4 conditions. And a copy of the Planning Commission meeting minutes is also in your meeting packets. In general, the Planning Commission found that the property line adjustment would have no impact at all on the 2 affected parcels or on the surrounding area because it will not change any current uses of either parcels or existing buildings or landscaping, or alter any access to the properties in any way. Furthermore, during the Planning Commission hearing, both owners of the parcels involved stated that they were in agreement on the proposed new property line, which is illustrated on the maps that you all have in front of you. To date, city staff has not received any written or oral comments in favor of or in opposition to the application. The 4 conditions of approval are listed in the Planning Commission's recommendation. The first 2 are intended to make it clear to both parties involved in the boundary line adjustment that any building or cover structures erected in that 250 square feet area must meet any setback and vision clearance code requirements or be subject to a variance application. The second 2 conditions were intended to outline and clarify for the applicant the next steps to take in recording the new property line survey map and then notifying the city when the county has finalized the recording so that the city property files can be updated with the new information. That's it.
Okay. Do any councilors have questions of the staff?
I have a question. I wasn't able to see in here what the purpose of doing this is. Is it parking? I wasn't clear on that. Yeah.
I believe the applicant will be coming forward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Will you be speaking?
Yeah.
And we'll answer that question at that point.
Any other questions of the staff? Okay, we will now be taking testimony from all of those who wish to testify. If you have not already done so, please sign in and include your name and mailing address. We will now take testimony from the applicant.
Good evening. I'm David Dumas, and I'm involved in this little property line adjustment. I think that I'm satisfied as to the terms of the adjustment. The use of it is going to facilitate RV parking. And I think it's already been stated the amount of property that's involved in it. I don't know whether the price of it or anything like that has anything to do with it, but I'm certainly open to any questions.
Mr. Dumas, you are buying this property then?
I am.
250 square feet?
I am.
And everybody's agreed to the price?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
We will now take testimony from those in favor, if any. We will now take testimony from those opposed, if any. And I gotta just say, we'll not take testimony from people who don't care one way or the other. I don't think I can say that. Counselor, do you have any specific questions for a person who has testified? All right, the applicant may request that the record be held open. Does the applicant desire to hold the record open, and if so, for how long?
For what?
I'm not certain.
If you wanted to have more time to think about it, or have us think about
I
it.
think we're fine.
Okay. I will now close this public hearing. It is 6:16, I think. We will return to new business. Item A, consideration of conditional use permit. The council may, A, approve the conditional use permit without any conditions of approval, or B, approve the conditional use permit with the conditions of approval provided by the planning commission recommendation. Or C, approve the conditional use permit with other conditions of approval determined by the council, or deny the conditional use permit based on findings of fact or other information identified by the council but not included in the planning commission's findings of fact or recommendation. So let's discuss the planning commission's findings of fact and recommendation and other possible conditions of approval. You've heard from Rapunzel what the four considerations were. Are there any others that you want to add?
No.
So we have a choice of either option A, approving the conditional use permit without any conditions, or B, which is where we are now, I believe. If councilors agree to approve the conditional use permit with the conditions outlined in the planning commission recommendation, then we request a motion to accept the planning commission recommendation as presented with conditions of approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, then we vote on that now?
Yes, please.
All those in favor of adopting the planning commission's recommendations as presented with conditions of approval?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then we request a motion to approve the conditional use permit with conditions of approval. No, we've already done that, right? And C, not there.
No,
Okay.
all you did was accept the planning commission recommendation and conditions. You haven't actually addressed the conditional use permit yet.
All right. So if counselors approve the conditional use permit with conditions, what am I looking at?
Okay, you should be requesting, it's at the bottom of page 405, request a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the conditions of approval provided in the planning commission recommendation. I know it's confusing, but it's a two-step
Okay,
process.
I'm requesting a motion to accept the planning commission's recommendation as presented with conditions of approval.
So moved. Second.
We did that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So that's the second time you've done that, isn't it? Okay.
So the next one is a motion to approve the conditional use permit?
They did this one,
Yes.
but this is what I was saying. here.
With the conditions of approval in the planning commission
Commission's recommendation.
recommendation. Is what you're doing now.
He said they just did that.
Okay, I'm looking for a
That's what I
motion
was
to
asking.
approve the conditional use permit with conditions of approval provided in the planning commission recommendation.
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
We're sure now.
I think we've approved it 3 times.
Whatever, we're sure.
So we're done with this, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, who was the second on that second one?
Duke.
Duke, okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you all, and thank you for your patience with my inability to know exactly what I was doing.
But you did it anyway.
Got her done.
That are done. So we're through with public hearings. New business. No, we've already done that, right?
You're at AA, you're at 9, double A,
9A.
second 9A.
Oh, yes.
Jamie has afterthoughts, you know, and so we just throw them in anytime.
So we're at 9A2. We are looking to appoint planning commission applicant Ken Pensnell, and the term would be from 1/9/2019 to 1/12/2022.
Mr. Pesnell currently sits on the planning commission and has done since 2016.
Okay? And he still wants to do it again.
He does.
So we just need a recommendation and
Just a motion to appoint.
motion to approve Mr. Pesnell.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We have next an appointment for the Budget Committee from Richard Snow. And his term would be from 6/30/2018 to 6/30/2021.
Council President Meyer, I have included in the packets the ORS regarding employment, which in this case, it's not formal employment, but it's appointment of a relative or a member of a household, and what is allowed and what isn't. It is allowed for you to appoint Councilor Snow's husband to the Budget Committee. However, Councilor Snow will need to recuse herself from the discussion and the vote.
Okay. Consider yourself recused. Any discussion of appointing Mr. Snow to the Budget Committee?
Just one question for Jamie. I assume that she's recusing herself from this vote, but there's nothing that means she would have to do so in any future budget votes.
Correct.
That's good clarification, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve Richard Snow to the Budget Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous with the one recusal. Scheduled downtown meeting to discuss failed ballot measure topics. Do you have a date in mind, Jamie?
No, I do not. Perhaps February or March. It depends
We
on.
could probably make that decision in January when we have the mayor.
It just
here.
depends, it depends on if you wanted to try to get it on an earlier election, a ballot or not, so. It doesn't.
I think that's probably gonna be early enough. There's some other homework I wanna get
On your
done.
first, okay.
So I'd
That'd
rather
be
put
fine.
that off until January.
Yes, sir.
And, yes. Now, our annual reviewed financial statements report. We have before you that in this blue folder. I was very pleased with it. I thought there were a couple of really nice statements in there. And my name's misspelled.
They can't have everything.
That way they can't pronounce you, right?
Well, I probably made too many comments about being facetiously being bipolar, so they have me listed as Myers. But I really like their statement in terms of based on their review, they're not aware of any material modifications that should be made to the accompanying financial statements in order for them to be in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, with or without a wall. Any comments? We just need to approve this or accept this?
No, it's just an informational purpose, if there's any questions anybody may have had from something that they read or reviewed. And I'm still around for questions, well, I'm not right now, but I will be after the first of the year around for questions that-
All right.
and clarifications.
So if you haven't had a chance to thoroughly read it and digest it,
Yeah,
If
it's
you get-
sleeping material.
I have
yes,
one question.
okay?
Jamie, what is restricted cash, 101,000 and change? That's a lot.
Some of the dollars that we get are specifically earmarked for only certain things. Most of the road money, and well, all the road money we get from the state, the gas tax money, is only for roads. That's all we can use it for. Building permits is only for permits, so things associated with permits, you know, inspections and that kind of thing. Our motel funds, much of the motel funds is restricted to only use for tourism and recreational activities. So there's really actually very little that is free to be used in the general fund for what we need to do to run the city.
Okay, so it's not operating money that's available.
You can use a little bit of operating money, but you can't get crazy with it. It has to be real, it has to be realistic. So that's why we track time so often, particularly when we're working on roads, because that, you have to be able to show that you actually spent the time on working on whatever road project it was.
Thank you.
But none of it can go toward your salary.
No,
Right, yeah.
Just yours.
that wouldn't be right.
Nor am I. There's not an executive session scheduled. Is there any old business?
No. Unless somebody knows something I forgot to put on here.
Well, some of it, so old we probably couldn't remember. Mayor's report?
He didn't submit one. He's sick.
Okay. Community center report. Duke, do you have anything to say?
Staff has been busy decorating, put up a tree. That's it.
Okay. And water quality, we've talked a lot about that in Silkus, and Jamie, did you have anything else to add?
Not at this point. I would encourage all Willoughby, Dune City, shared domestic water supply people on our program to report your monthly water meter readings, please. Thank you.
The public works maintenance report is here.
I did write a report, but Mr. Palmer is here to fill you in on the current happenings,
Okay,
especially with regard to Levitt.
great.
Levitt Loop, we've had a complaint about water runoff into a person's front door. Went out, assessed the deal. There was no drainage in the sides of the road. We had no ditches, water running right down the pavement. So I went and removed a tree, put back cleaned some ditches, made something temporary to kind of show that the water needs to be over here and there's a culvert that needs to be used and get it back up and going. Quite a conflict with neighbors happened, but I got it done and we stayed out there. It rained really hard, watched it through the night. Oh my gosh, water. We probably helped 75% of the issue. So we still need to finish it and do some more work there. But our really big problem that we've been having, and there's been a lot of complaints with water runoff and flooding people out again. We're running into, on this Levitt Loop thing, I got 3 neighbors there that during watching all the rain happen and being out there, the water's running off of their houses. Their downspouts, their gutter drains, and their paved areas, in front of their garage and everything. The water's just running right off of them, right down the road. And sad thing is, in some of these places where this is happening, we don't have enough road. There's no place to put a ditch to try to capture this water to go anywhere. We really need to figure out something of what to do in these kind of situations when trying to get the people to keep the water on their place or do something to where the city, does a little bit to kind of help out, but we just can't be having pipes. I'm digging along and finding pipes coming off of people's property, stubbed out into the bar ditch. And here lately, I don't know whether people are doing this at night or what, but there's more been showing up that weren't there. And the problem is we just don't have the drainage to take care of all that. Just keeping up with what we have on our roadways is very tough. So this Levitt Loop thing, I have it, I think, diffused and going fine right now. You know, the fellow's really making big waves of proceeding with legal action, but I think I got it kind of held so far. I've got to talk more to some of the properties there to see what we can do to fix the water problem a little bit. But our Huckleberry thing, with all this big rain we've had, that project is working beautifully. I have not seen one puddle of water. We actually have water running uphill that I didn't think we could do, but it is. I mean, it's, that old drain that was there in that little island that for all these years that didn't work and we made the water run the other direction and it's working.
Yeah, that's great.
So, that and we spent some time sweeping a large portion of the roads, getting some of the debris off, and things flowing a little bit better. I think there's probably some more that need to be done.
We attended the class.
Oh, yes, yeah, we attended the, what was that, there's a
ODOT sponsored class.
public safety of city streets and roads deal. Very informative. Man, I learned things that I had no idea. This guy a professor teaches us, I guess, pretty much all over the United States. He is the leading authority in all the city to come to him for road safety, do's and don'ts and all this stuff. And I learned that a stop sign, to be legal, has to be all clear of vegetation, but not just a sign, the post and everything around it, to be legal. And it was brought up there, Florence's code enforcement officer was there. The guy was talking about this, shows you a picture on the screen, you know. So he asked the code enforcement officer, okay, so what do you do when you see something like this? He says, well, I guess I'd write it down, you know, we'll write a letter and send it to the people. And he says, absolutely not. You're there, you see this problem, do not leave that until you get somebody out there and get it fixed. Once it's done, then talk to the people or send a letter. He said the problem is, if you ignore that situation, and in the meantime, while you're trying to write a letter and fights go on, discussions, somebody has a wreck, city's liable. So in turn, there was a whole lot of stuff, he said, where the city is liable on stuff, you know, just hitting clear view intersections up to code and all this stuff. You get in trouble and it needs to be done. And when there's a situation of something, you know, they talked about brush and stuff and roadways and being wide and all this, do it now. Don't write letters, don't ask somebody to do it. Do it.
Don't pass the buck, fix it.
Well, and it makes perfectly good sense. I mean, he rattled off so many lawsuits that they've had over this stuff, and it does make sense. And he said, today's way is lawyers first, and he says, no, they just recommend just do it. Don't think twice, just then work it out after the deal. At least then you've relieved your liability, so.
The one that surprised me was the explanation that, say you have a tree in the right of way, and some person comes down there, and even if they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, if they run into that tree, it's in our right of way, we can still be held liable for that. So it becomes, in my mind, this important thing. Here we are living in a forest, and I know people are gonna scream bloody murder to go out and take all those trees out. So, and it's not gonna happen anytime soon. But there are some that are particularly noticeably bad.
Yeah.
that need to come out, and I know a lot of people are not gonna be happy about that, but they've got to come out.
Yeah.
Richard, I thoroughly appreciate all that you do for us, and I think everyone up here at the desk is at the same place. It sounds like maybe one thing we could do is in our next newsletter, start initiating some of these ideas about what we need to do and what they need to do. As long as they're gonna be living in the city, they have a responsibility to try and help all of us take better care of it and be safer. So maybe an article or two in that newsletter, and maybe we could, while we're meeting to discuss the failed ballot measures, maybe we could have some more discussions in terms of ideas as to what else we can do to help Richard with what he's doing to help us.
Well, we just really need to get something with this water. I mean, I don't know, I don't know how to say this, but the thing that we just went through turned out to be a big eye opener and there's more of it, you know, people. And I gotta admit, it's legitimate complaints.
Yes.
But also, I also see some of this stuff that's like, the city's caught right in the middle to spend a bunch of money on something that's really not
Yeah. If
our
we-
fault. If we maintain our roads in our right of way, what more can we do? We don't have a code or any kind of thing dealing with, most of these new houses, any buildings or even what they're doing with the runoff. You know, and that's what I see is causing a really big problem. I mean, Woodland is a bad example. That's been going on now for, shoot, I don't know, 4 or 5 years we've been fighting that deal.
Mhm.
But lo and behold, I think that a property owner just helped us out because they took out a whole lot of trees and cleaned things up. And while they're doing that, they found the elusive culvert that we've been looking for all this time. So we found it, one end of it. Now we just got to figure out where the rest of it is. But I think that'll help that drainage problem. Okay, that's all I
I
have.
have one thing, Dad. After I seen you, Richard, I walked down there and looked at that.
Oh, that one,
Yeah, those driveways and stuff like that. I mean, could we write them, can we ask folks? It looked like to me maybe a good French drain at the end of each one of those would help. What do you think that would help at all?
Well, if we got somewhere to go with it,
Yeah,
you know, and this is the problem with the thing on Levitt. The property owner that's getting flooded out was very upset. Believe it or not, I actually got him calmed down and I kind of went along with some things that he wanted, you know, to hear to get him calmed down. And we talked about putting in that French drain like what I just did down there at the resort. But I tried to explain to him, I said, sir, that's gonna cost us about $4,500 a section and we need 2 of them, 3 of them in there. And I said, and I couldn't guarantee whether that's really gonna work. You know, it's the only thing we can do and it would help, but I said, we just don't have that kind of money to do it. In some of these steep driveways that people have, yes, I think some drains. Now, he did that on his property because his driveway's all paved, goes down, takes her. I mean, but he put some of those across to their plastic trough with metal grate. Pretty nice little deals. They were, he said, fairly cheap and pretty easy to put in. Now, some of these people, I think that would sure help us. But some of these large concrete and paved driveways that I'm seeing, and they're all just sloped right to the street.
yeah.
But I think we need to, I mean, we discussed this a long time ago, especially on the new stuff, we need to start addressing that any of this new housing going in, that we deal with this before.
Bonnie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the issue of drainage for new houses, which is under Oregon construction law. A house has to provide sufficient drainage on the property for the full dimension of your roof, or the square footage of the roof, not the house. And if you come by Souter Drive, you'll see there are 3 homes under construction. They all have big drains where the water goes into. And you can see from the recent rain, the water is there on the property, not running down driveways or anything else. And that's by Oregon Building Code. It was effective 2018.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Jamie, do you have anything more to report on emergencies
Other than what's in here, no. I would make the announcement that the annual expo will be March 30th. And there's going to be the communications test the last week of April. And of course, emergency management is encouraging local communities to harden their communication and electrical systems as much as possible. That's why I sent you the email, which got some really amusing responses about how to get a hold of you in the event, in 3 different levels, you know, all right, everything's fine, what's the best way to get a hold of you? You know, cell phone, whatever. We have power, but we don't have internet. Where do you want me to, or, you know, and all that stuff. So we still need to work on that a little bit. Come up with a way. That smoke signal's probably not effective.
You didn't like my carrier pigeon idea?
Well, I would like to pursue the
No,
carrier
please.
pigeon.
All right, the Western Lane Emergency Operations Group report.
That is what that was.
Okay, and your city administrator recorder planning staff report?
I think we've pretty much covered everything in the report.
Okay.
There were 8 building permits issued in November, but no new construction, and there was 1 grading permit.
Okay.
And before anybody calls, the property at the end of Alder Drive, they have been notified that they have to get a delineation from the state and get permit from the state before they can do anything. So don't call me. We're on it. Thank you.
To the good of the order.
I have a question.
Okay.
Jamie, I'm gonna back up to the stop sign issue and somebody getting in a wreck. Does the city has no liability insurance for things
No,
like?
we do have liability insurance. That's what we have the most of, is liability insurance.
What is the limit?
I don't recall. I do not know. I'm sorry.
But in the event of a wreck or a lawsuit because of the weeds growing around the stop sign, we do have some insurance coverage to handle that?
As far as I know, if you'd like, I would invite John, our representative, our agent, to come speak to you guys sometime. Because you can ask him those questions, because lately it seems like many of the things that I thought should be covered by them weren't. And I would like to hear the answers to those
I
questions.
think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, please do. Everyone agrees?
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
It seems to me that in the past, about this time of year, and I could be wrong about the timing, but it seems to me that we have given the staff a small amount of what might be called a bonus, enough for a cup of coffee and a little bit more. Am I recalling correctly, Jamie, and did that come at this time of the year, and have we done anything this year?
Yes, it's usually done at this time of year. I would hope that under good of the order, someone would, but let me tell you, rules have changed quite a bit. So if I write a check to the staff, I have to take out taxes, I have to pay PERS and all that other stuff.
Okay.
So my thought was a better idea might be a gift card within the limits under state statute, so
Okay.
that's what I'm recommending.
I would certainly propose that we do that, and do you recall, I have a number in mind that it was last year, but do you, I may be wrong, do you remember what we did last
I
year?
think it was 50,
50?
I think
That
so.
was more.
Well, last year was a difficult time. I felt sorry for staff. They got beat up pretty bad.
Yes.
Last year.
That is true. That is true.
Not that this year is any better, but we've got it under control. We're doing great, aren't we?
Anybody have an amount in mind that,
What's the limit of the statute?
Well, for gifts for elected officials is $25. For gifts to, but we can, as the city, give them up to 50. Probably up to 100, but
right,
at least up to 50.
and we're talking about
4, so.
4.
I always think a staff is 3. So,
No, your staff, Jamie's staff, I mean.
I always forget myself.
Yeah.
If you want to give me something, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Definitely.
say no.
I make a motion to
Yeah, all right.
$200 for staff gifts. Total. It's $50 divided by 4.
Well, except she's saying, we want to include Jamie, so. That's 4 with
It's
you.
4 with me.
Yeah, okay.
She said 4, he said 4.
We said
That's
four.
$200 for 4.
I can't count her.
I second that motion. Is
Whatever
that
it
include
was.
Richard?
Did you get
Pardon?
something?
Does that include?
staff.
Would you like a gift card?
All right, all those in favor of,
Well, I think we should include Richard. Can I change it to $250?
you
If we
can, as
can.
far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
Second. He works.
Anybody else want to be included?
So the
All right.
motion is for 250.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Maybe accompanied by the To the Limit song, whatever that is.
Maybe to the limit.
All right, for the good of the order. Susan,
No, thank you.
anything?
Everything's good. That's it. Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
All right. Merry Christmas to you all, and
To all of
thank
you.
you for coming. To all a good night. And adjourned at 6:47.
All right.
You never did that.